We're joined now by Lee Crater with Research Connections, Linda K. Smith from NACRA, Dr. Valora Washington with the Kale Institute, Luis Hernandez from Western Kentucky University, Diane Trister Dodge of Teaching Strategies, and Eric Karolik with the Early Care and Education Consortium. Our first question is from Jan Hume from Alabama. Jan, what's your question?
Assuming we can't afford to increase salaries in these tight budget times, what else can we do to attract, train, and keep quality pre-K teachers?
Jen, that's a great question. Obviously, we want to retain those teachers. Diane, what ideas do you have?
I think teachers want to feel respected for the work that they do, and they want to feel that they're growing and learning and gaining new skills. So I think it's really important that we build capacity within programs to support teachers, to provide coaches and mentors, and to individualize our staff development, because every teacher doesn't need the same thing. A beginning teacher is at the stage of survival and wants very direct support, whereas a teacher who's been using a curriculum and working several years needs another kind of support, and a teacher who's very skilled wants to be reflective and to help others as well. So I think building capacity is really important.
I know that Valora has some thoughts about this as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important in these tough economic times that we realize that children have to come first and that we have to make the sacrifices and help our state set the priority to be on children, now more than ever.
Great. I think we're ready for another question, Ray.
Okay, great. We have an email question from Betty Bassoff from California. In relation to the presentation on the Community Connections model, what standards were used to select family child care partners, or were there any specific requirements?
Well, that's a good question too, and our expert on that Community Connections is actually Lee. So Lee, will you start us off?
Thanks, Libby. All the caregivers, of course, had to be legal. They had to be providing care that's legally operating, but regulated providers, and you saw some in that tape who were had very well-equipped homes, and unregulated providers. You saw grandmothers. This is open to all home-based caregivers.
Great. Anyone else have some thoughts on that, Eric?
I think it's important to remember where the children are, and when we build systems, when we build programs, we've got to address the resources that are necessary to help those children where they are.
Yeah, it's exciting to see actually people reaching out to home-based care. It's a great model. Ray?
We have another question on email from Peg Tyre, journalist and author of The Trouble with Boys. She writes, studies show that nearly 4 times as many boys get expelled from preschool as girls. What should be done or not done to make preschools more boy-friendly and lower the expulsion rate?
We all agree that expulsion should never happen, but Diane, I know you have some thoughts about this, and then I'm going to let our men chime in.
I think we've got to be really worried about this statistic that we're failing boys. And I think one of the reasons is that the expectations of what 4-year-old children or preschool children should know and be able to do have to be appropriate. And if the curriculum is not developmentally appropriate and children are asked to do things that they're not ready to do, the children who act out the most are the boys. Because girls are more likely to try to please the teacher and to go along with things even if it's not appropriate. So I think we have to pay a lot of attention, even something as simple as what kinds of books you put out. Boys tend to love nonfiction books, content books, and if you look in a library and you don't see any, then you're already not meeting their needs. So I think we need to be very careful about this and not allow this to happen.
Okay, Luis.
Well, Libby, I could have been one of those boys. You know, I could have been really expelled very early on in my career. But I think what's really damaging here is to think that the message that we're sending, that a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old could be expelled from a preschool, what does it mean long-term for that child, certainly for that whole family? When we talk about school success, we really want the very best for children. And the social emotional life of children is probably, for me, more important in order to be able to make academic progress. So the message we're sending to community says, these boys have no place in our community, and that is wrong.
Okay. You want to say something?
Sure, I'll say something about that, because one of the things that we're talking a lot about in Massachusetts is also how do we invite more men to be part of our profession? We need more men in the classroom working with children, and one of the things that we're finding is that you have to make a specific invitation to men to consider education and working with young children as a viable career option. And that's something that I think we all can be committed to.
I know Lee wanted to say something
Just
before
one
we
more
wrap
point.
up.
I think this high expulsion rate, or higher, much higher than it should be, is a signal of where we ought to be focusing our professional development. It could be much saying more about the way that teacher is relating to the kids than it is about the kids' behavior.
Yeah, because no child should be expelled from pre-K.
Absolutely.
Ray.
Our next question is from Tim Selden in Florida, who is the president of the Montessori Foundation. Tim, what's your question?
The Montessori educational approach is being used and has been shown to be a highly effective model for delivering quality pre-K education in almost 5,000 public and private Montessori schools in the United States and in tens of thousands of schools around the world. It is showing particular promise in the United States in the inner city schools and with the rural poor. Montessori seems to be one of the few models that has survived the test of time and has been shown to be replicable, adaptable, and sustainable for more than 100 years now. What role do you see Montessori education being able to play in helping to achieve the national goal of ensuring quality pre-K education in the United States?
That's a fantastic question, and Pre-K Now is very, very proud of our partnership with Montessori because you have such great schools. Let's see, Diane, do you want to talk a little bit about Montessori?
Well, Montessori is one curriculum approach. I think it's a very good one, and there are many good curriculums out there. So I think the important thing is whatever curriculum you're using should align with the state early learning standards. But most important is what teachers are doing. You have wonderful Montessori teachers and you have teachers who need a lot more support. So I think the critical question is that teachers understand the curriculum that they're using and they get support in implementing it well, because it's a well-implemented curriculum that matters.
Eric, you see some Montessori programs in your work?
Have members who operate Montessori schools as well. You know, Montessori is one approach, and I'm very keen on it as a father of a Montessori early childhood graduate. But I think it's emblematic that there are many community-based providers who deliver pre-K, state-funded pre-K, across the country. One of my larger members, the Learning Care Group, which has Montessori Unlimited schools, delivers pre-K in over 20 states. And I think it shows that there is tremendous capacity and there's a lot to be gained from pre-K delivered in this community collaborative approach.
Libby, I'd like to add something to this too. I think in the model that we saw in Wisconsin too, there's room at the table for everyone, and I think that this inclusivity, we really need to promote this in terms of getting all of the players, Montessori, any philosophical approach to the table to talk about this and to be part of the solution. So I think it's a great place for collaboration.
We want everybody to have choices.
Absolutely.